9 German fighters circle below him. His engine is already coughing. His wingmen are scattered or gone. Standard doctrine says, climb, regroup, rejoin formation. Instead, he pushes the stick forward and dives straight into the center of the enemy formation at a speed that makes the airframe tremble like sheet metal in a storm. For a moment, the Spitfire is not flying. It is falling. What happens in the next 4 minutes will not be written into doctrine immediately. It will not be endorsed by headquarters. It will not be taught in classrooms. But it will change the way fighter pilots think about combat for the rest of the war. Spring 1942. The skies over northern France belong to the Luftwaffe. British fighters patrol in neat formations shaped by pre-war theory, disciplined, symmetrical, elegant in the way parade ground movements are elegant. The tactics are orderly, rational, and deadly in the wrong direction. The manuals emphasize mutual support, formation integrity, turning engagement, altitude advantage through structured climbs. On paper, it is impeccable. In practice, it is killing young pilots faster than training schools can replace them. Fighter command is bleeding experience. Every sortie across the channel is a calculation. Fuel versus range. Altitude versus exposure. Courage versus probability. The Spitfire is a magnificent machine, responsive, balanced, capable of tight turning fights that feel almost graceful. But the men flying it are being taught to fight the last war. They merge. They turn. They stay engaged. They die predictably. The Germans have learned the rhythm. When a British squadron appears on the horizon, the Bf-109s climb and feint, inviting the Spitfires upward. Once the British commit to the turning fight, Focke-Wulf 190s, faster in the dive, heavier in firepower, drop from above. It is geometry. It is altitude layered like steps on a ladder. It is patient, and it is lethal. Squadron leader Marmaduke Thomas St. John Paddle, Pat, to everyone who flies with him, does not look like a man who intends to challenge doctrine. He speaks softly. He moves without drama. He has the build of a farmer and the manner of someone who learned early that arguing wastes energy better spent solving problems. He was born in 1914 in the Orange Free State of South Africa. His father was a mining engineer. His mother believed in discipline without spectacle. There was no room for excess in that household. You worked. You fixed what was broken. You did not complain about gravity. You adjusted to it. Pat learned to fly in Johannesburg in worn-out biplanes patched together with wire and optimism. He soloed after 7 hours. His instructors noted 2 things. His hands were steady, and he did not hesitate. He flew the way other men drove farm trucks, without ceremony, without panic. In 1936, he joined the Royal Air Force on a short-service commission. England, then Egypt, then Greece. Gladiators first, then Hurricanes, then Spitfires. Each aircraft was not a symbol. It was a tool, and Pat treated tools seriously. His ground crew noticed something long before his superiors did. After every sortie, he walked around his aircraft slowly, not inspecting for damage. That was their job. He ran his hand along the wing roots, checked the elevator hinges, asked how the ailerons felt at high speed, whether the rudder stiffened in steep dives, whether there was slack in the trim tab linkage. He was not merely flying the aircraft. He was studying its limits. He wanted to know how far he could push it before the metal protested, because he had begun to suspect that the sky did not belong to the man who turned the tightest circle. It belonged to the man who controlled speed. By late 1941, over the Mediterranean, Pat's kill tally began to grow quietly. No flamboyant victory rolls. No long bursts at extreme range. He closed in, fired short, precise bursts, and disengaged. Other pilots admired his calm. He did not brag. He did not recount engagements theatrically in the mess. He listened. He watched. And he noticed something about turning fights. Turning stretches time. When 2 aircraft lock into a circle, each maneuver becomes reaction to the other. Decision loops lengthen. Energy bleeds away. The aircraft slows. The fight becomes endurance. Endurance favors whoever has friends arriving from above. In northern France in 1942, that is usually the Germans. Pat began doing something that made older pilots uncomfortable. He stopped turning. Instead of merging and committing to the horizontal plane, he stayed high. If the engagement began to coil into a turning fight, he would extend upward, convert speed into altitude, and then, without warning, dive back through the center of the melee at maximum throttle. It looked reckless. It looked unsophisticated. In the officer's mess, someone called it the caveman approach. No finesse. No classical geometry. Just speed and violence. They said it violated principles of coordinated engagement. They said it left wingmen exposed. They said it was gambling. Pat nodded and kept diving. He understood something others did not. In combat, time compresses. The pilot who completes his decision cycle faster wins. Turning engagements slow the cycle. They offer the enemy time to react. A vertical dive collapses it. You see, you commit, you fire, you are gone. There is no drawn-out exchange. There is no negotiation. A fighter climbing into a turn is predictable. A fighter diving at maximum speed from above is a problem without a ready solution. You cannot outturn gravity. You cannot outclimb momentum. March 1942. The air war over France has become methodical attrition. German fighter units operate in pairs at staggered altitudes. One engages. The other watches. When a British pilot commits to the turn, the unseen wingman descends and ends the fight. British squadrons still fly tight VICs of 3, beautiful, disciplined formations conceived in peacetime. In combat, the spacing forces wingmen to guard against collision as much as enemy attack. The Germans ignore the formation core and pick off the outermost aircraft like wolves thinning a herd. Loss reports return with depressing consistency. The pattern is clear. The solution is not. Changing doctrine requires approval, testing, and consensus. The enemy requires only opportunity. Pat tries to explain his method once. In the ready room, chalk in hand, he sketches altitude ladders and energy arcs. He talks about potential energy stored in height, kinetic energy gained in the dive. He describes striking from outside the opponent's expected plane of engagement. His squadron leader listens patiently, then reminds him that fighter combat is not a solo performance. Mutual support, discipline, formation integrity. Diving away from one section is not standard practice. It is risk. Pat does not argue. He has learned something else about systems. When experience and process collide, process wins the meeting. Experience wins the fight. So he stops debating and keeps flying. By April, his confirmed victories outpace others in the squadron. By May, he is among the highest-scoring Allied pilots in the theater. The numbers are difficult to dismiss. The method remains controversial. Some younger pilots begin experimenting with diving attacks. Some return. Some do not. The tactic requires judgment and intimate familiarity with the aircraft's structural limits. At high dive speeds, the Spitfire's control surfaces stiffen. Compressibility begins to creep into the edges of the envelope. Wings flex under load. Rivets strain. It is not something you teach from a blackboard. It is something you feel through the stick. The old guard remains skeptical. They say Pat is lucky. They say he is exceptionally skilled and that average pilots attempting the same maneuver will kill themselves faster. There is truth there. Pat is not average. But the critique misses the larger point. Average pilots are already dying. They are simply doing it in a more doctrinally acceptable way. And the crisis is coming. It will arrive in late May, over northern France, at 22,000 feet, where 9 German fighters will circle beneath a single Spitfire, and doctrine will fail in real time. Late May 1942. Intelligence reports a heavy Luftwaffe buildup forming over the Pas-de-Calais, fighter units stacking in altitude, not to protect bombers, but to draw the RAF in and cut it apart. A sweep designed to bleed fighter command the way you bleed a patient, not with one fatal blow, but with repetition. Command chooses to meet it head-on. Every available squadron is scrambled. Pat's unit is part of the response. They take off in early afternoon, climbing into a sky already crowded with contrails and radio chatter. Voices overlapping, call signs colliding, the sound of too many people trying to impose order on air that does not care. The brief is brutally simple. Engage the enemy. Protect the bombers. Survive if you can. No one says what everyone is thinking. That the Germans have probably chosen the place and time. That this is their trap. And that today the RAF is expected to walk into it. The merge happens at 22,000 feet. Pat sees the structure of it before he sees individual aircraft. High above, Bf-109s in loose elements, weaving lazily, holding altitude like money in the bank, waiting for the British to commit upward. Below them, a second layer, FW-190s, heavier, faster in the dive, sitting like a hammer held back for the moment the nail shows itself. It isn't a swarm. It's a system. The squadron leader calls the standard play. Climb. Engage the high cover. Maintain formation. It is not stupidity. It is what the book says. It is what keeps a unit together, what prevents single aircraft from being isolated and murdered. But Pat knows how this sequence ends. The 109s will play the turning invitation, keeping the Spitfires busy. The 190s will drop through the vertical, hitting the British as they climb and bleed speed. The formation will fracture. The Germans will pick the edges clean. Pat watches the geometry set itself and makes a decision that will either get him court-martialed or get people home. He does not ask. He does not announce. He simply brakes. The Spitfire tips forward. Throttle to the stop. The nose drops through the horizon and keeps dropping until sky becomes earth and the altimeter needle unwinds like it's been released. Acceleration is immediate and physical. The airframe begins to tremble, not a dramatic shake, but that thin, high-frequency vibration that tells you the wings are carrying stress they were never meant to carry for long. The controls stiffen as speed builds. The stick stops feeling like a lever and starts feeling like a weight. The engine note rises, hard and urgent. Pat stays in the dive anyway. He isn't diving away. He's diving through. Below him, the 190s are looking upward. Their attention is on the climb, on the moment British fighters commit and become slow. Pat is arriving from above and behind, outside their expectation, outside their timing, faster than anything in their planning. He closes from 300 yards to 200 to 100 in seconds. He picks an aircraft on the edge, slightly separated, a fraction out of position, the kind of small mistake you don't see until someone makes it fatal. He fires. Not a long burst. A controlled, short strike. The 190 shudders and rolls away, smoke spilling from the engine cowling, and then gravity takes it. Pat does not watch it die. He is already past the formation, already pulling out, already converting speed back into position. The German pilots react, but reaction costs time, and time is what the dive has stolen from them. By the time they roll to find him, he is gone. He pulls out at 12,000 feet, wings loaded hard, body pinned into the seat. He feels the Spitfire complain, subtle, structural, not a scream, a warning. Then he looks up. The sky is chaos now. The squadron is engaged, scattered, stitched across the air like broken lines. Tracers flash. Aircraft turn in tight spirals. Distant dots fall away trailing smoke. The engagement has dissolved into exactly what doctrine was supposed to prevent. And Pat is alone. Exactly where he prefers to be. Because alone means he can dictate. He climbs back up at an angle, not straight vertical. Enough to rebuild altitude without bleeding speed into nothing. He watches. A 109 is sliding into position behind a Spitfire from his squadron that's already turning hard, trying to shake him in the old way. It won't work. The 109 is patient. He knows the Spitfire will tighten until it slows, and then the shot will be clean. Pat drops again, shallower this time, a slashing pass from the side. He fires from farther out than the textbooks recommend, not because he loves range, but because the geometry is perfect and the 109 is committed. Tracers walk into the fuselage. The German breaks off, rolling away, abandoning the chase. Pat does not follow. He never follows. He is not collecting trophies. He is removing threats and staying alive long enough to remove the next one. For the next minutes, the fight becomes a pattern that only makes sense if you stop thinking of it as a dogfight. Pat does not orbit. He punctures. He uses the vertical plane like a ladder, up for energy, down for violence, trading altitude for speed, speed for position, position for one clean firing solution. Every attack is brief. In, fire, out. No lingering turns. No heroic circles. No prolonged chase that drains his advantage and hands the initiative back to the enemy. It is not reckless. It is economical. He finds a Hurricane being worked by two 109s, one pressing, the other setting up to finish. The Hurricane has nowhere left to go. Pat drops onto the trailing 109 and fires. The tail section breaks, control surface is gone, and the aircraft flips into a spin that it does not recover from. The second 109 breaks upward in reflex. Pat follows the brake only long enough to put rounds into the cockpit area, then immediately unloads and climbs away before the enemy can reverse and trap him. 2 strikes. 2 exits. No argument with physics. Now the Germans start looking for him. Not in panic, professionally. They realize there is a lone Spitfire attacking from above, appearing at high speed, delivering damage, and vanishing. So they begin to lift their heads. And that's the point. Every German pilot who looks up is a German pilot not pressing an attack on a bomber or a turning British aircraft. Pat is not only killing. He is disrupting the rhythm of the entire engagement. He is turning their coordination into individual reactions. And reactions are slower than plans. His engine temperature climbs. He sees it. He understands what it means. High power, repeated dives, the radiator working at the edge, heat building in the system that cannot be bled off fast enough. Fuel is dropping faster than it should. Ammunition is thinning. The logical move is to disengage. Dive away. Go home. But then he sees it. A 190 lining up on a crippled Spitfire trailing smoke, barely holding altitude. One more burst will finish it. Pat drops again. The closure rate is brutal. 2 aircraft accelerating toward the same point in space. He fires, and the 190 erupts into fragments. Engine and wing root coming apart at once. Violent enough that even Pat flinches as debris flashes past. The crippled Spitfire wobbles away, still alive. Pat pulls up hard, and the G-load crushes him into the seat. The world narrows. Gray creeps in from the edges. He relaxes pressure just enough to keep consciousness, just enough to keep blood moving. Then he climbs again. By now, he isn't counting. Counting is for the ground. Up here, it's only threats and angles and time. He sees a 109 trying to extend away, damaged, losing coolant, a thin white trail behind it. He makes a pass, close, short burst. The aircraft drops its nose and falls toward the channel. Whether it crashes or limps home doesn't matter in this moment. It is no longer attacking anyone. Pat uses that same rule over and over. Remove it, move on. Then 2 FW-190s finally get their eyes on him at the same time. They come in together, disciplined, the way hunters move when they know the prey is tired. Pat is low now. His options are narrowing. He cannot climb away. Not with their speed advantage and his heat-soaked engine. He cannot turn with them. That would be suicide. So he does the only thing left that still belongs to him. He dives. Not a gentle extension. A near vertical plunge. The airspeed needle swings high. Past comfort. Past manual. Past what a cautious man would ever attempt. The Spitfire groans. The controls stiffen until the stick feels welded into place. He holds it anyway. He is not racing them. He is doing something worse. He is making them decide whether to follow him into a dive that might kill all 3 of them. The 190s hesitate. Only a fraction, but fractions are life. One follows briefly, then breaks away. The other loses him against the sea haze and cloud shadow. Pat pulls out so low the water seems to rise toward him. The G-force hits like a hammer. Vision blacks out for a moment. When it returns, he is level, alive, and the wings, somehow, are still attached. He turns for home. The engine is coughing now, uneven, heat-stressed. The fuel gauge is a suggestion more than an instrument. And as he crosses back toward the coast, he sees one last German aircraft limping toward France, smoke trailing, flying as if it wants nothing but distance. Under normal circumstances, it would be an easy kill. Under these circumstances, it is a risk. Pat has almost nothing left. But he closes anyway. He fires a final short burst, more hope than volume. The aircraft shudders, noses down, and disappears toward the water. Then Pat stops hunting. Now he is just a pilot trying to get a damaged, exhausted aircraft home. When he reaches the English side, the engine begins to starve. The cough becomes persistent. He adjusts mixture, coaxes what he can, and accepts what he cannot. He glides the last miles, low and quiet, and lands with the kind of focus that doesn't look dramatic from outside, but feels like holding a fragile thing together with your hands. The Spitfire rolls out and stops. Only then does the engine die. The ground crew runs in. They see empty ammunition bays, heat-stress panels, a faint distortion along the wings from load and pull out, oil streaks where seals have been pushed hard. Someone asks how many. Pat hesitates, because memory in combat is fragments, not film. He raises his hand, shows 8, then pauses, searching through the sequence. Corrects himself. 9, if the last one finished. No one cheers. Not at first. They just look at him. Because what they're hearing is not just a number. It's a method. A way of fighting that ignores the comfortable shape of doctrine and replaces it with something colder. Speed, altitude, initiative. The squadron leader doesn't reprimand him. He doesn't congratulate him, either. He simply stares for a long moment, then says the only thing that matters now. Explain it, step by step, exactly what you did. And that is how a ripple starts in wartime. Quietly, not with orders, but with survivors trying to understand the one thing that worked. The debrief lasts longer than usual. No one interrupts him. Not when he explains the first dive. Not when he describes ignoring the climb order. Not when he details how he refused to turn, refused to be pulled into the horizontal spiral that had claimed so many before. He does not dramatize it. He talks about angles, about closure rates, about how long it takes a pilot to see a threat, process it, and react. He talks about how a turning fight stretches that reaction window, and how a high-speed dive collapses it. One of the younger pilots says what everyone is thinking. You weren't dogfighting. Pat nods. No, he wasn't. He was striking. Within days, the story spreads beyond the squadron. Not the number first, the method. Pilots who survived the same engagement describe what they saw. A lone Spitfire diving again and again, appearing above the German formation like a thrown blade, firing, vanishing before return fire could settle. It wasn't wild. It wasn't chaotic. It was controlled violence applied in seconds. The key detail begins circulating in ready rooms. He never stayed. He never committed to the turn. He never accepted the geometry the enemy offered. He imposed his own. At training units, instructors begin mentioning energy, not as theory, but as survival. Altitude becomes something more than position. It becomes stored speed. Speed becomes more than motion. It becomes protection. You cannot be shot easily by something that cannot stay with you. You cannot be surrounded if you refuse to remain inside the circle. The younger pilots absorb it first. They have fewer habits to unlearn. They begin experimenting, not recklessly, but deliberately. Climb above the engagement. Wait. Select. Dive. Fire. Leave. The first few attempts are uneven. Some dive too steeply and compress the airframe. Some misjudge recovery height. Some panic and stay too long. But slowly, the rhythm changes. German intelligence notices. Loss reports begin referencing British fighters striking from above and disengaging without turning. Gun camera footage shows Spitfires slicing through formations instead of orbiting inside them. The Luftwaffe adjusts, spreading altitude layers further apart, scanning upward more aggressively. But that scanning costs them focus. And focus is finite. The turning game that once favored them begins to erode. Kill ratios stabilize, then improve. Not dramatically. War rarely moves in dramatic spikes, but measurably. Enough that squadron leaders begin permitting vertical attacks as an option rather than disciplining them as deviations. No formal memo announces the shift. It happens because the pilots who fly that way are coming home more often. And survival is the only statistic that truly persuades. By late summer 1942, what had been unofficial is becoming practice. The phrase boom and zoom begins appearing in conversations, not in manuals yet, but in the language of those who understand what is happening. Boom, the dive. Zoom, the climb back to altitude. Energy in, energy out. The vertical ladder. It is not romantic. It is efficient. It avoids heroics. It avoids duels. It favors the man who chooses when the fight begins and when it ends. And that idea spreads faster than any printed doctrine. Pat continues flying. He does not tour. He does not lecture. He does not give interviews. He simply keeps leading by example. His kill tally climbs past 30, then past 40. Exact numbers blur, shared kills, damaged aircraft, the chaos of confirmation in combat. But the influence is undeniable. Younger pilots seek him out quietly. They ask about dive angles, about throttle management, about how to judge when the wings are near their limit. He tells them simple things. Don't stay. If you miss, leave. If you're slow, you're dead. He doesn't call it theory. He calls it common sense. And then, as war often does, it ends for him abruptly. In April 1941, over Greece, during a low-level strafing run, his aircraft is hit. Ground fire. Close range. Unforgiving. He crashes. He is 26. His death is noted, filed, mourned in a squadron already accustomed to mourning. The war is too large for grand pauses. But the method survives him. By 1943, vertical energy tactics are standard across Allied air forces. American pilots in P-47s use high-speed dives as doctrine. Soviet pilots adapt similar principles on the Eastern Front. The swirling horizontal dogfights of 1940 are increasingly obsolete. By the time jets arrive, the logic is foundational. Speed, altitude, initiative, strike first, disengage, reset, survive. The mathematics of air combat shifts permanently, not because of a memo, not because of a committee, because a pilot decided the old geometry was wrong. Decades later, tacticians will formalize the principles. Energy maneuverability theory. The OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. Fast transients. Control the tempo of the fight. All of it echoes the same truth Pat had felt through the control stick long before it was named. The pilot who dictates time dictates survival. He never wrote a manual. He never theorized in print. He flew the way logic and physics told him to fly. And in doing so, he gave others permission to question rules that no longer matched reality. There is a photograph of him, standing beside a Spitfire, hands on hips, looking off camera. He is not smiling. He looks tired. Not heroic. Not theatrical. Just focused. The kind of man who fixes problems quietly and moves on. There is no grand monument. No museum wing devoted solely to him. He is one name among thousands carved into the history of a generation that burned quickly in the sky. But his influence is everywhere. Every fighter pilot who climbs into a cockpit inherits the same logic. Speed is life. Altitude is insurance. Initiative is everything. The 9-kill sortie was not luck. It was the culmination of hundreds of hours spent studying a machine, testing its limits, and refusing to accept a pattern that led only to loss. It was proof that doctrine is a tool, not scripture. That survival demands adaptation. That courage is not reckless defiance, but calculated action when evidence contradicts instruction. He did not wait for permission. He did not wait for consensus. He saw a better way. He tested it. He proved it. And then he flew it. The skies over northern France are quiet now. The contrails long gone. The gunfire silent. But the principle remains, carried forward in every modern cockpit. Control the vertical. Control the tempo. And when everyone else climbs, dare to dive.